Of Ghana's first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ibrahim Abubakar, looks at the state of the pencil factory he did establish in Kumasi.
Behind me is the pencil factory, one of the several factories established by Ghana's first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. The existence of this factory meant the country produces and uses locally made pencils without having to rely on imported ones. Thousands of jobs were also created, but the narrative has changed. The factory is now defunct, and we have to import pencils in the country.
Nkrumah made factories in Kumasi. He had a jute factory, he had shoe factory, he had pencil factory. Pencil factory is just around Ababu. Jute factory was at Insane, shoe factory also around Insane, and the tobacco factory was at Ejura. And these are factories that produce what Ghanaians need. And this, apart from the fact that it is helping Ghanaians, it also creates jobs for us. And Nkrumah did all these things to ensure that it helps us grow our economy. Because if you have to import all these things, it means it's going to affect our economy. And look at all these things that I mentioned. Now they are all imported. Because if you have the pencil factory at that time, with all that structure it has, if it still exists up to date, one would have think that it would have enhanced, maybe had another branch somewhere which would engage more Ghanaians. We would have been fighting for jobs today. If all these factories, even in Ashanti, are working, what Nkrumah intended to do with all these factories was to make sure Ghana be of its own, so that we can manage our economy the way we want it. I feel disappointed anytime I see any of the factories. And one will ask why. It is all because of the way Nkrumah was exited. After the overthrow, people intend to make Nkrumah look devil. So even the factories were not allowed to function, so that people will remember Nkrumah. Let's allow it to spoil, let's get it destroyed, so that people will forget about Nkrumah. Because the more you enter into all these factories, the more you remember Nkrumah. We thought we were doing Nkrumah, now we are doing ourselves. There's no way you can start with over 100 factories and end up having 20. Today we are proud of one district, one factory, which is a PPP thing. Compare it to a total ownership of a company. Which one is an improvement? The one we own or the one we are sharing?
Thousands of youth would have been actively working if this defunct pencil factory and other ones are operational. Ibrahim Abubakar, TV3 News, Kumasi.
Let's go to the eastern region, where my colleague Adjoa Konedo Yadam was also at Kede to speak to the 73-year-old chief of Adankrono, Osaberi Masapon Nkrumah II, who for 10 years worked at the match factory set up by the late President Dr. Kwame Nkrumah.
The chief of Adankrono in the Kwaibibre municipality, Osaberi Masapon Nkrumah, started his working life with the then vibrant Kade matches factory. He tells me the factory was his only hope and that of other young people in Kade and its neighboring communities.
Ye papa no man na say ye ni ohwefo a obeto aye so no onya wie school apa na Kade factory na so ko yedwuma.
It used to help us a lot, especially those of us who could not further our education. First, I was employed as a factory hand. We were those that worked directly on the matches.
He was there until the new owners decided to move the factory to Accra.
67. Enna free fa ene kotokanom etu Kwame Nkrumah ban egu yes 1967. Enti omo ebe take over no omo ton the factory ema French for abrofo.
After Kwame Nkrumah's overthrow, the factory was sold to some Frenchmen. That was the end of the factory.
Enti ye nipa ye ho so no omo se omo di factory no konkret ne ahwase ne na wie ya no.
For 10 years, the factory took care of him and his family until it collapsed. To him, moving the factory to Accra was the end of Kade. He calls on President Akufo-Addo to pay attention to the welfare of rural dwellers.
Mr. Akufo-Addo assembly Ghana mine na e to me na che nsa no say yenkrase for entwe ni hwe enkrase.
I am pleading with President Akufo-Addo to pay attention to the villages.
Na me hwe ebi kuro pa kwanya omo faso dia ko nkromu a ya na asefem
Down, down they go. A journey several meters underground. These are illegal miners in Abosso, a town in Ghana's western region. This town, once upon a time, was an industrial enclave. With rich gold and manganese deposits, it hosted the Abosso Glass Factory and the State Gold Mining Corporation. 60 years on, they've all collapsed.
Fish, so I'm calling you Bindi. Tiasra na Wambo Sunuma and any Bindi. A boss you are never. Takwa boss you never, and soon while here. Sisi Agana Pama Osaka Paka for one city pool, Bob Blue. That's you to me, maybe. To Wambo Takwa boss, man. Ah, yes, sir.
Think about 6 kilometers down the belly of the earth. That's how far many young people here would have to go to find gold. And hundreds of people, men and women, would go into pits like these every day. This is just one of the many harsh realities of a lack of jobs in mining towns like Abosso.
From Brimensa. I am the quest, but my nickname Tompo, now man for the name of Galam Senum.
Outside the pit, I meet 32-year-old Obri. His parents came to work for the glass factory in its heydays 30 years ago in Abosso. He fell out of school when his father was laid off as the factory folded up.
Because of a human mesa wire basan, Nasun Kajumati oh, Hank, any bimbo so many Jumana. In Coba may be a ditching at the same, be an any better, or by no kama, but a Juman yeden, Uncle Dunitino. Am I a wire basawa, a Juma amount for so Wayan Wahadea on any the Majuma.
The result of young people flocking Galamsey sites is not hard to find in Abosso. The Divestiture Implementation Committee, the government office supposed to be managing these factories, refused to be interviewed for this program. They did not give me access into the factories. So I've come here on my own, seeking to find out how the collapse of these factories is affecting lives here. The contribution of industry and manufacturing to Ghana's GDP has fallen from over 10% in 1993 to around 3% as of 2014.
The plans were that they were going to supply more than 80% of the bottle needs, anything to do with glass of the country. And of course, this time you have all these beer breweries, Coca-Cola, Fanta, and what have you. And then anything, and later on they would have gone to slit this flat glass sheets using all sort of in building houses and that sort of thing.
The people who suffer the most in an industrial bust of the scale like that which has happened in Abosso are the country's poorest and most vulnerable. Private mining companies here try to employ young people, but a global price collapse of resources like gold means they are slashing jobs and many are being asked to go home, causing even more joblessness.
People are stealing, thieves, everything. These social rights, people are, that's what I'm saying, everybody's struggling in a living. So any means at all, he gets money, he's just struggling.
For JoyNews, my name is Justice Beidou.
The Municipal Chief Executive of the Tema Metropolitan Assembly to help us understand why the current state of Nkrumah's factories is what it is now, or what he left with us. It's good to have you. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Now, you have presided over that particular municipality, which was the industrial hub of this country. Why are those factories in that state in which they are now, 60 years on?
Thank you. It is, I can say that the problem we see with our industries today is a mix of policy, ineffectiveness of certain policies that were put together in the past. I say that because many of the factories were built during the time of first President Kwame Nkrumah. You can talk about many textile industries those days. You have the Tema textile industry, you have the GTMC, GTP, many of them.
And GTP is struggling now.
They are GTP is struggling, and all the other ones have gone underground, and many other industries. They started folding up at the time when we had a complete liberalization of, economic activities. Complete liberalization. So anybody, if you have money, you could import anything that's all you wanted to import. And it was for a reason that we thought that when there's competition, then the companies will work very effectively. But we forget that sometimes when we go complete liberalization, the companies may not be able to compete with the other ones that we are importing.
Sorry, the importation of cheap products
yes.
into the system, sometimes fake and inferior products that we're competing
they may not be,
what
are being imported may not be fake. They may be good. But because we hadn't developed the, we call it the economic of scale properly for us to be able to compete.
Because
equal quality.
These companies are borrowing at high cost. The cost of production is high.
Our local companies borrow at high cost, and therefore they are not able to compete with the goods that are imported. And therefore, at a point, they cannot stand but just to go underground. We also forget that the life of our country depends on these factories. And therefore, I call something preferential protection. We need to give a certain protection in a way so that we keep them running for them to be able to employ.
So you support protection policies or protectionist policies
a certain protection
businesses in this country.
For certain businesses, those ones that we see that they can employ a lot of people. Because if you go completely liberalized, they may not be able to compete. Meanwhile, those ones are the ones that are employing a lot of people. And therefore, they are keeping people on a job. Look at I know when the Tema Textile, TTL was operating. I know when GTMC was operating. These were two companies in Tema which were employing a lot of people. When they went underground, because they couldn't compete with the commodities that were coming in. Not because those commodities were inferior, but because they were cheaper than what was being produced over here. The company had to go underground. And all their staff walking about, and it's, you can mention many of them.
Sure.
But if you want to develop this country, you can't forget what Nkrumah did.
So the mistake they made was that they threw away the baby with the bathwater. Exactly. They overthrew the man and cancelled his ideas.
Now, let me tell you, a history of academic of arts and sciences. GAEC, Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. Yeah. Nkrumah wanted the Ghana reactor project. So he started the Ghana reactor project. He got the Russians, the UDSSR, the Soviet Union, to help us. And so they built the reactor, and they had almost finished. And they were bringing in the core to start the thing. And then the coup came. When the coup came, NLC invited a gentleman, John Douglas Cockcroft, who came and said that, look, this reactor is not important. Nkrumah wanted to train scientists and to get the reactor also to produce isotopes for use in hospitals and elsewhere. And then later on, get researchers, scientists who will be in a position to run a nuclear reactor capable of producing electricity for Ghana. So that would take years. So Cockcroft said, oh no, Akosombo is there, you have enough power, so there's no need for this reactor. But Nkrumah did not say that from the very beginning. He wanted to produce nuclear energy. He said, introduce nuclear sciences, train sciences, research reactor, get isotopes for use in the hospital, and look at other uses of peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And then this man was saying, and so NLC too, they agreed. It was in 1973, that's Bernard. It's very interesting. 1973, when the champion came and then commissioned another professor in Cape Coast to look at it. They said, look, we should go ahead and do it. And then they started again. In 1976, we were going on. And then the coup came in 1979. So the whole thing stopped again. Until 1995, when we came again and then signed an agreement with the Chinese to build a small reactor. The original one was 2,000 kilowatt. What we have now is 34 kilowatt. We will not be able to do anything. So really, after 1976, it was only in 1995, 2017, that we really had something that one could say is a nuclear, experimental nuclear reactor. So this is what I'm saying, that we destroyed, and the factories that is set up, most of them were destroyed, set up, sold and things like that. You don't throw the baby, what do you say?
With the bathwater.
Yeah.
The forces of light will eventually overcome those of darkness, and truth will always prevail over falsehood. This is a moral law which cannot be denied.